Hey guys, I've talked a lot about the father wound, but I've never really explained it in my writings or in some of the video talks I've done. So I want to take this time now to do that, to explain just what the father wound is. What it essentially is a theory to try to explain the origins of homosexuality, or why homosexuality manifests itself in a boy or a young man or an adult. Now what it is that everyone would agree that to a child, the most important and the first relationship they'll ever have with a man is with their father. Now if that relationship is absent through abandonment, or it's faulty because of something as severe as, let's say, physical abuse, or it's just as faulty because there was a failure of attachment there, that there's going to be this wound there within the boy because he hasn't experienced that masculine affection or love or affirmation. Now, the criticism that this theory gets is that a lot of times the majority of men would say that, well, I had that faulty relationship and I'm not gay, because only about I would say between 4 and 6%. There's a lot of argument about there. Between 4 and 6% of the population is gay. But the thing is, the human brain and the human mind is very complex. And within certain people, you'll have a clicking, or something will just move in their head, and they will make the swerve towards homosexuality, and others, they won't. Here's the thing. Now, the human mind and the brain is very complex. Now, in certain people, when you have this problem with the father, it's going to click something in the brain. Other people, it won't. Other people, it will click something else. Now, I have had friends that had these issues with their fathers and certainly did turn out homosexual. But I've had friends that had issues with their father, sometimes much more horrendous, much more violent than anybody I knew in the gay world, but they dealt with it in a different way. Sometimes they became alcoholic, sometimes they became porn addicts, sometimes they became unable to have any kind of commitment with a woman. Now, in the homosexual boy, what you see a lot of times, and again there's a lot of variations, is what I call, you have a perfect storm, where you'll have this father wound, but you'll also have some other conditions that come up. Sometimes it's a personality trait which may make you seem more effeminate or more artistic or more delicate or something like that, unsporty. And then this will set up an issue with peers at school later on, where you're set out and you're set apart and you're made fun of and you're teased. And in my personal life, I went through that as well, where at school you get called fag and queer and all those words. And what that will do is it will further alienate masculinity from you. It will make it alien, it'll make it foreign. And then, especially as you grow older and enter puberty, what is different and what is outside of yourself, normally that would be the female, well, in this case it's the male, that becomes sexualized. Now, in the era I grew up in, which was the 70s and the 80s, this is the first time pornography was ever mass-produced and, very easily available. What that does, too, is you have an erotic image, a pornographic image in front of you, and especially in the 70s, you saw the great growth in gay pornography, and So now you have an actual image in front of you, which a lot of times will solidify the homosexuality within the boy. So now you have all of these things going on. Now into adulthood, because again, in the 70s and the 80s, for the very first time, we have the gay rights movement, where suddenly you are not in the closet, or homosexuality is not that unspoken, vice, or it's not that thing that nobody talks about. Suddenly it's okay. It's okay to come out. It's okay to be gay. We got gay pride. So people, really what that did was that solidified, or that locked in the orientation, because people felt socially that it was okay to declare their homosexuality, their gayness, if you want to call it that, and come out. And with that, and that created, now you've got a step from the wounded boy with the father to the teen or the man that comes out, and then you have a homosexual. The second part of this explanation, I want to talk about, or read here, what some well-known gay writers, homosexual men, have had to say about the father wound, because a lot of critics will say that this is just some sort of made-up theory or psychological babble by the homophobic, or pushed forward by people prescribing reparative therapy or things like that. The first one I want to read is by Andrew Halloran. He was a very, very famous gay novelist, still very much is. Many men, straight and gay, wish they'd been closer to their fathers. To this day, when I see in public a man and his son talking or holding hands as they walk down the street, I linger on the sight. Once in a restaurant, I watched a boy sit down in the next booth with his father and a group of friends. Tired from an afternoon of fishing, the boy proceeded to rest his head against his father's shoulder, and then the father rested his head on top of his son's, so that the two of them were folded like chimpanzees that had just groomed each other. I could scarcely contain myself. The image of this father and son expressing their affection, their trust, their intimacy in so unself-conscious a way was astounding to me. It seemed so what I was never able to do with my own. Really a sad statement, but a really truthful one, and a really humbling one, that he was able to make here. I have another admonition, I guess you could say. This one is from, it was a very famous psychiatrist, Richard Isay, I-S-A-Y, I think I'm pronouncing his name right. He was really the godfather, you could say, of modern, gay shrink theory. He was very instrumental in homosexuality being removed from the diagnostic manual of mental disorders back in the 70s. So he was in no way supportive of there being any sort of psychological genesis for homosexuality. But he had this to say, which is interesting. The majority of gay men, unlike heterosexual men who come for treatment, report that their fathers were distant during their childhood and that they lacked any attachment to them. Reports vary from my father was never around, he was too busy with his job, to he was victimized by my mother, who was always the boss in the family, to that of the abusive, unapproachable father. It's really undisputable here, because now we have, next, I want to reference some studies that have been done. And what it says, multiple studies have been conducted to assess affection in human relations, including the father-son relationship. Using the Affectionate Communication Index, psychologists have been able to measure affection within relationships. Males who are homosexuals tend to be neglected emotionally by their fathers and receive less affection than their heterosexual counterparts. It's all here. Again, I'll reference my own life. I did feel very much at times rejected and alienated from the important men in my life as a boy. And this did set up a feeling of outwardness, a feeling of isolation, a feeling of loneliness, a feeling of anxiety. This, especially when it happens at a young age, and then later it's going to manifest itself in your personality, which it did. And then young boys being as vicious as they can a lot of times, and it's sort of a pack mentality, like Lord of the Flies. They do team up on you, and they do persecute you, and they do make things as life as horrible as possible. And that, certainly happened to me. They became gravitating more towards girls as maybe something more safe, rather than boys who were tormenting me. And then you start relating more to women, and then men become the other, and they become eroticized, and they become sexualized. And then as an adult, you can't figure this out, or you've buried it because it's so painful from your early life. And then what happens is you try to act out, or you try to very much heal that wound, and you do it in a sexual way. Now, I picked this up very, very early. This is all hindsight, I didn't see it at the time. Entering the gay lifestyle as an 18-year-old boy, I saw that young men were naturally, or in that world naturally, that the older men would always go after the younger boys, and it was sort of an initiation process. It was sort of thought of as loving, as your daddy, so to say, was breaking you into the life. And for young boys, young men, that's very attractive, because you're finally receiving that love from your father, or from that older man that you never felt that you had. Now, this is very much goes on in culture now, where you have this proliferation, or very much popularity, of daddy porn in gay pornography. Okay, the father wound. You know about it. I've told you a little bit about it. And what do you do about it? That's the question I get from older guys that want to get out of the life, and have sort of been through it, and now they're really able to understand it and accept it. You can go to different doctors, different psychologists, psychiatrists that will help you. I'm simple. I'm a simple guy. I like illustrations. Here we have a bell, and there's several bells, in here. This is an interesting one. It's a little smaller, and it's a little beat up. These larger bells here were always in a church. They were always in a church belfry. This one, for some reason, were separated at one time. This one ended up in somebody's garage for many years. It wasn't used. It wasn't used as a bell. It didn't ring. It didn't make a noise. It just sat. It had stuff laid on it. People, I'm sure, put junk on it, and it was just forgotten and sort of abused and neglected, you could say. But the form of this bell is just like these other ones, these other larger ones, no different. What they're made of, it's a bell. But it lost, it lost its purpose. It's lost its function. How easy is it for it to gain its function back? Well, it's simple as this. Someone moving it. And I think that's the way our Lord Jesus Christ can very much work in our lives. And then, let me switch over to here, guys. Here's those other bells that never lost their way, you could say, or never got dumped, because they're all the same. Now, the analogy I'm trying to make here is that, us that have gotten stuck in same-sex attraction into thinking we were gay, coming out as gay, we're like this old, abused, abandoned bell that got dumped somewhere. And probably at one time, sitting in that garage, and we thought that's where we belonged, or that's where, in that gay ghetto, that's where, in the gay lifestyle as being gay, that's where we were. So we came out and we accepted it, and we accepted ourselves, and for all that dysfunction and for all that disorder, when in reality we weren't being what we were supposed to be. But if we just allow Christ into our life, just as easy as that, He will renew us and really take all that old way of thinking and that old life away from us, and it'll be over, and we will be what He made us to be and how He made us. Simple, but I like simple answers. Hey, God bless you all. God bless you. Bye-bye.